Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tate for the first entry in a very special series to commemorate the 25th anniversary of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. In the lead up to HBO Max's Harry Potter, we are doing a retrospective series on the film franchise, which is going to be really interesting to do because this will be the last time I ever see these films before a TV series releases, to which there will be screen comparisons, book comparisons. It will change the future of this corporate term IP. But before we get into any of that, Tate, how are we doing today?
Yep, doing really good. It feels weird kind of watching back through this franchise kind of for the last time in the current state that it is, and having a new series coming along that you're going to have that comparison to, especially because of all the film franchises out there, this is the one that our generation grew up with. So it's the one where kind of, we kind of followed it as kind of kids as the films came out, and the hype around the different kind of books releasing and everything like that. This was almost kind of the biggest IP, horrible corporate term, but biggest IP for our childhood outside of Star Wars. But Star Wars has kind of transcended generations with the fact that it didn't release in our original childhood. We just had, the prequel kind of trilogy come around at the same time. This is the one that was original to us, and now it's going to be transferred over, and it's going to be original to a whole new generation of people. And it'll be really interesting going back through this franchise kind of for the final time, on this channel and talking about this in this iteration before we actually have that new series coming in and have something to talk about, kind of new but not new with the franchise and new but not new with the Harry Potter universe.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun one to do. I think something a little bit different. I know we did the fan casting series with Paul. We've got a couple of guests lined up that are going to be on these film discussions. We're going to approach these ever so slightly different to how we've done normal reviews. We'll cover some of the features we've done, but we've got a couple more. I want to say like not interactive things, but we'll look at for the Philosopher's Stone, it's 25 years ago. We'll look at maybe what's an actor up to 25 years later. What have they done since? Was there something? We're going to have a little section for something that changed the book. One thing we liked, one thing we didn't. We're not going to go deep into book changes. We're not going to go deep into what people have done. But each episode will give people the opportunity to talk about a subject or someone they would like to. And I do think that makes it interesting, something different to what we have done before. And if we're lucky at the end of the series, we'll have some cool stuff. These are going to run twice a week, every Monday and Friday throughout August. You might be wondering why now? Why not in the lead up? We don't know the air date. I'm sure we'll find that out on September the 1st. I know the trailer said this Christmas. That could mean December. That could mean Christmas Day. So I don't know what to think of there. And this channel's got a couple of other big series plans around that time, leading into June, the Denis Villeneuve retrospective. The announcement video for this came out on July the 31st, which is Harry Potter's birthday, and this series will wrap up the day before September the 1st, which, with the Return to Hogwarts marketing day, maybe there'll be a trailer that day, maybe there'll be some cool stuff that week at the studio. We should have some more details in the future of what that could look like, but yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. And where we'll kickstart this, the official HBO Max synopsis, which is where you can stream Harry Potter, and it's easier to do this synopsis than all the others, I can assure you. On his 11th birthday, Harry Potter finds out that he is a wizard and is invited to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Simple, to the point. Tate, you've already elaborated ever so slightly, but I want to sort of ask your thoughts, and we'll both go through this. This will be the heaviest way we do this because it's the first one, but what is your memories with this series? I'm going to ask that to the guests each week, but me and you will go through it. But something a bit different about doing it on Philosopher's Stone, which was the first one.
I'm trying to remember if I ever saw this in cinema. I don't think I did. I think the first Harry Potter film I maybe saw in cinema was Chamber of Secrets, but I know for a fact that I have vivid memories of watching this on VHS. Like I remember watching it like at home, and I also remember my dad reading me and my sister kind of the books as children and having those kind of read as bedtime stories, whether it was a chapter or two chapters at a time, and going through and kind of, being introduced into the Wizarding world that way. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I think this may have been one of the least viewed Harry Potter films across all the films. Don't get me wrong, the first two films are great, but whenever I do rewatches, sometimes I start from the third film. I think the context of the first two films, and I'll go into this when we kind of talk about the film a little bit more in depth, but kind of, I remember understanding from a young age that these two were magical and they brought the world to life and everything like that, but the films were better from the third onwards. So, yeah, I don't think I saw it in cinemas, but I do have vivid memories of watching this at home.
This is interesting. I remember seeing this at the cinema twice. This came out November, the birth date of our good friend Jed, as in not birthday, the birth date is the day this film came out. So whenever it's his birthday, okay, that's Harry Potter's anniversary. So we'd have been 5 in a few months because we're a month apart on birthdays. So I was taken to see this. I hadn't read the books at this point in time. I don't know. My sisters have read the books; they're a little bit older. But I distinctly remember watching this at the cinema with my auntie, who I punched in the face when I got jumped by the face coming out of the book as a child. The story is I just punched her in the face, and I've always remembered that. And I know I watched it with my family, so I saw it twice at the cinema as a kid. Then obviously Chamber of Secrets comes out, like a year later, which is wild in this day and age. Even for 2000s to get a
Yeah.
sequel out within a year, like they went back to back on shooting. I think Chamber of Secrets started filming like the week this premieres, which is still
Mhm.
crazy. Which obviously the show's gonna have a completely different shooting schedule for varying reasons. But I loved this. I like what you said. Rewatches are weird with me because I just tend to do all 8 films. Like obviously when the
Mm.
films were coming out, as we got to grow up with them coming out, I'd always rewatch them all. So I've probably seen this the most, just on the logic of this film existed for 6 centuries before the last ones.
But I'd say as well, and this is a British culture thing, ITV2
Yeah.
shows these films every single year. So we have some kind of terrestrial television in the UK, which is kind of the 5 channels: BBC, 1 and 2. You got ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5. And then ITV has a second satellite channel, which is ITV2. And they show it every single year around Christmas time. And sometimes it jumps onto ITV1 as being shown. And they advertise it as a big deal because it's like, oh, Harry Potter's coming back onto ITV and they're going to show all the films. I feel like with some of the films, if I don't catch the first or the second film, I don't mind it. But you'll jump onto it and go, oh, Harry Potter's on the TV. I'll just watch this film as it's on at the moment. And maybe sometimes that's the case of where I think that this is my least watched film, because sometimes it'll be like, oh, I didn't realize they were showing all the films again. I'll just jump in at the second film. I'll jump in at the fourth film or the fifth film or whatever, because they're showing it at that time.
Yeah, and I think Bond's up there with those British productions that
Oh yeah,
ITV like have
100%.
a bit of a monopoly on. And with this one in particular, it is interesting that Harry Potter has become not a Christmas film, but a Christmas
Mm.
tradition within British culture is the key word. And literally, if the show's going to premiere December or Christmas time, that like really epitomizes that. And I do think this in particular perfectly does the Christmas side of the story. And I won't get into in the books this, in this, that, and the other. Like in each entry of the books, Christmas is a chapter, and something happens every year at Christmas. And I understand it wasn't always easy to do that for films, but in those earlier ones, like this, where it is integral to the story, I think they nail that. And the fact that the studio
Mm.
tour has a Hogwarts in the snow season every year since it's opened speaks volumes about how they see that, like Harry Potter in themselves within, again, the IP term, which makes it an interesting. It's part of our culture. Again, seeing them, last time I watched these was about a year and a half, 2 years ago with my parents. They'd never seen it past Azkaban. They took me and my sisters to the first 3, never took us to another, and they loved them. And for me, like, not that I'm a patriotic type, this sits with Bond as like the defining British cinema, like not franchises, that's the wrong word, but they are regarded as the highest level of the British film industry.
I
They
mean, if
sit
you
at the
if
top.
you go to America, there are 3 things in Britain that people love. It is Harry Potter, it's James Bond, and it's Downton Abbey. Those 3 things Americans are obsessed with, and they are kind of, I put forward as the 3 big kind of British kind of pushers overseas for kind of marketing or tourism and stuff like that based around kind of England and stuff like that. People travel all over the world to go to the studio tour, or to go into London, to go to King's Cross, or to, visit locations, whether it's going up to Scotland to some of the castles or anything like that, or going into the little villages, or whatever. It's kind of, it's got its own industry kind of around the franchise, and I don't think that would have happened without the films being produced. I think the books alone wasn't enough to make this the worldwide mega hit.
I agree with you. I think the films come in at a point that transcends. We'll get into some behind the scenes shortly,
Yeah.
and obviously we've got to talk about the author, and I need the right words to make a sort of polite
Yes.
disclosure. Because, I mean, I don't mind saying now, you cannot do this series as I'm constantly doing without acknowledging the author J.K. Rowling, and by acknowledging the author J.K. Rowling, I'm very open to, how do I say this? It's harder doing reading than writing.
Criticizing her, you can say that she is she's one of the greatest fantasy writers, or you could say, for children's fantasy books, one of the most influential, and kind of could be seen as one of the greatest children's authors of all time. She is mired with controversy, and to the point where she's tarnished a legacy, but she's weaponized her influence to the point where she is either suppressing or downright treading down, like, on human rights. Exactly. And we can say that we absolutely love the franchise and love the world building that she was able to create, but we can also turn around and say that we do not agree with her political views and her personal views on basic human rights and what it means to be a human being, what it means to be a trans human being, or anything within the LGBTQ plus umbrella. And I think it's safe to say that you can be, it's a hard thing to separate art from the artist, but she had influence on writing the films. She did not make the films. She obviously wrote the books, and there's that entire discussion behind that. But we can sit here and say, we like the films, we can like the books, we do not like her as a person because of how she kind of acts in her own personal life.
Yeah, and from like an outlet perspective, because I've spoke to many friends about this, who've been on videos, who aren't. From covering it as an outlet, the HBO series, like, I understand there is a backlash to that, and the logic I've took is, I will respect anybody that chooses not to watch it, that chooses not, or if they watch it and don't want to like publicly talk about it, that's okay. From my perspective, running out there, I will not be encouraging people to go and see it, even if it's the best show I've ever made and surpasses, Breaking Bad, which it probably won't. I would not be saying you must go and see the show, because it's not fair to do so, but I will approach it as I would running out there. And I've only ever boycotted one film, which I laugh at now in a bad way. It's not funny, but my issue with boycotts, if I'm allowed to say it on this video, because we'll get out of the way on Philosopher's Stone, my issue with boycotts is that it shouldn't stop and start with a singular entry. You then need to climb that ladder higher. And with Mulan, which it was for me when they shot at the Yukar death camps, why would I boycott Mulan and not the rest of Disney? And that's my personal approach to boycotts, which is why I don't partake in them past that, because I just thought it was a bit hypocritical of me to go into a Disney film like a month after. And I'm fine to do HBO Max's Harry Potter, this film series, and there are many people that were attached to this series before the political stuff was out in the open. And I know it's been very difficult for a lot of fans as well. So I'm not here to approach and play games of politics, pointing fingers, laughing, deriding. We're here to celebrate the legacy of this film series, but it's a fundamental taken into account. It's taken into account by Warner Brothers when she isn't involved in the 20th anniversary reunion documentary they made. And I think that's a big thing there. And the fact that, the Fantastic Beasts films were the last contribution she made to the IP, before they did Legacy Without Her, more successful. And the series, which I believe she has less say in than these films. First off, there's an American Dumbledore. That's a different conversation. But let's awkwardly get that out of the way. To anyone that's been watching, I promise we are going to talk about the film, and we'll use that to jump into the behind the scenes, because we've mentioned the books. Let's talk with the film behind the scenes. listen, we could do a podcast on the production. You could do one of those like weekly ones. We don't have the time to do that. We're doing an 8-film retrospective series, but a big name that's a part of this, David Heyman, who has gone on to not just be the producer of the Harry Potter films, but he's done Paddington. He's doing Harry Potter again. He's doing James Bond. He's done films like Marriage Story. He's done Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's been an incredibly successful producer across his career. And in 1998, he wanted the rights. His assistant spoke to him and said, there's this great kids book, you should have a read. There's a very famous story they play at the studio tour where it was just on a shelf. He didn't have any interest in it. The assistant read it, was like, you got to get the film rights to this. And at this point in time, Chamber of Secrets had just come out. And then he negotiated with Warner Brothers. And in 1999, they bought the first 4 book rights for £1 million, which is kind of laughable. What I can't find out is when they basically bought the entire film rights for the film series moving forward. Because Warner Brothers now have the entirety of, I believe, the media, if that makes sense, like the media side of Harry Potter. And it's been well documented they have tried to outright buy the intellectual property Harry Potter and have been rejected multiple times, which I think would have saved a lot of issues for many people, if I'm allowed to say that. Even so with the theme parks, we're getting Universal UK in a few years. The original plan did not include Harry Potter Land. That kicked off. And they've had to now make some adjustments. So yes, we are going to get Hogwarts because Warner Brothers contract stipulated that we would have the big tourist attraction. There was like, you literally can't have a theme park here and not.
It's a British theme park, which your studio, your company has some form of rights to whatever it is, part of the franchise, the broadcasting rights or whatever. You make sure that you get the most British thing that's going to draw crowds in at the theme park. And I know that you've got the studio tour as well, where you can go and see kind of, some of the sets and some of the kind of things that went into the making of it. But like, if you look at Disneyland, for example, they've got Galaxy's Edge, where they've got, the whole Star Wars thing and stuff like that. That isn't a set. That isn't somewhere where they film things, and that isn't to do with the behind the scenes of it. But it's still a theme park based thing where you can go and visit things and enjoy things from that universe, whether it's a roller coaster ride or whether in the case of Star Wars, it's bounty hunting and it's like,
immersion.
Food. It's immersion. It's full immersion. So I think, it's the right decision to eventually say, okay, we'll include Harry Potter in the plans because that will be probably the biggest money maker from it. Otherwise, honestly, who cares?
I mean, genuinely, my thoughts on this, it kind of reflects the anniversary of this, right? The legacy of the series, that you can't run that theme park here and not have Hogwarts when it is at Tokyo. It's at LA. It's at Florida. Like, you cannot then tell the British public, sorry, not for you, whilst giving them Paddington Land, giving them Lord of the Rings. I know that all of them have Jurassic Worlds, but it just, I'm glad they've 180'd on that. I'm glad that Warner Brothers signed it off with Universal, came to their senses. If they're that desperate, stick a train do duo tickets for Studio Tour and the theme park or something. I know it's Universal Warner Brothers, but they can figure it out. They want money. We're not going to say good on them, make more money, but it's a bit of common sense. And sticking back to behind the scenes on this film, as part of the contractual agreements, the cast would have to remain British and Irish unless the characters were from elsewhere in Europe, which I think, talking about what we'll get to later, the cast across many of these episodes, looking back at 25 years, probably the best decision they ever did with the series, with the film adaptations, because it could so easily have become this. I don't want to pick on Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is 3 or 4 American actors, and that's absolutely fine. It's a very, very small amount. But there's something about this being this British cinema, and if you don't let, I don't sound racist, if you let Americans in, you just start to have had big name Americans replacing British actors who are household names now but were not in 2001 and before. And I think that what this does to the careers of so many actors, whether they're younger, whether they're like theatre actors, or whether they're sort of British actors that haven't had big breakthroughs, this series became this huge. If you can get on Potter, that's like your career changer. And I do think the TV series is going to go through that again. And I know with Fantastic Beasts, obviously they, set in America, they let Americans be in it. fine, you can have that. But yeah, it's. Would you say it's the best thing they did? I mean, it just shows that David Heyman had the right approach with the author.
It was a correct decision and direction to take with it. Keeping it British kind of meant that it didn't feel like an international kind of show. It felt very inherently British, which is what the story is. It's about a British boy going to a British school. And of course, some of the teachers in there, and as the books go on and stuff like that, you do get characters from all over Europe and everything like that. You get characters kind of coming in. And of course, they've cast them correctly as well to kind of the nation or country in most cases, from where they should be coming from. But to keep it as a British thing, it makes sense. It makes complete sense.
Yeah, we'll talk about a couple of those actors later. Of course, we're not flying through this, but there's a couple of names I want to bring in here. Stephen Kloves was hired to do the screenplay. He ended up doing all of them except The Half-Blood Prince, which is very specific. I've never known why. But he was a huge part of these film series being adapted. And maybe a character we'll talk about a lot in the next few weeks. His favourite character is Hermione Granger, which explains a lot of changes, which I'll get to in some episodes. But it was essential that he was involved. There was this consistency with there. Susie Figgis was the casting director who passed away at the end of last year. She is responsible for putting this together and did an incredible job with that. And she's not just done Harry Potter. Her career on many British productions. Lena Headey's one of the big names that she scouted, that she found, not to make it sound like a football transfer. But yeah, what she's done with British actors is remarkable. And I'm glad it took them too long, but now there is casting recognition with award season. This is why we get to shine a light on people that don't normally get that, which we can talk about this 25 years later. But that's a big behind the scenes I want to talk about, because there's so much we can dive into. We're going to talk about the world building, a few other things. Steven Spielberg was originally attached to direct this film, which speaks volumes about the scale of this from day one. And he would go to leave after the second draft was written, and he would then help in getting Chris Columbus hired. Now, Steven Spielberg obviously worked with him for many, many years, and Chris Columbus was most well known for directing Mrs. Doubtfire, for directing Home Alone. I think did he write Gremlins? He'd been involved with Amblin Entertainment for a long time. Probably one of the best decisions they made, and this isn't me criticizing Steven Spielberg. I'm not doing that at all. But Christopher Columbus, who's worked with children, comes to the UK. He's worked with Macaulay Culkin. He was wary of what happened to Macaulay Culkin even in the late 90s with what his parents had basically done to him and his brother. We won't sort of elaborate on that, but it's public knowledge. And obviously with UK laws on young actors, that was not going to be possible anyway. And then what I was reading was, leading into this production, they even tightened up the UK laws on kids on set purely for this, because this series was going to production, because there'd be so many children shooting long term across over a decade. I know in so many interviews Chris Columbus has spoken about he wanted they were children, like he had to look after them, he had to teach them to act, not to act rudely, but he had to train them about how to be on camera. And this, he wasn't babysitting them, but there was a very delicate approach.
Yeah.
And I do think, looking back, I know the first two films, they sit under that sort of double umbrella that he's done himself, but it strikes me as something quite special that he almost creates the boundaries ready for them in the future to take the reign by themselves.
I find it really interesting because, as well as kind of making sure they're protected, and knowing that Chris Columbus had worked with, kid or child actors before, the fact that they were schooled as well and made sure that they were, they were looked after and they weren't exploited. They weren't, put in front of the media too early. They weren't, any of that. Because, I mean, and we got the same thing with this new series. Whoever they pick as the lead three are going to end up being mega famous. Like, these three actors who, got picked for, the original Harry Potter film, you're looking at, Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, like, they were at one stage the three most famous actors on the planet, and they were children. Like, that's such a big pressure to be put on them. But with all three of them, the fame never got to them, and they never felt truly influenced by that, because I think the decisions they took in the first film to keep them kind of not sheltered, but at least protected from that kind of, from the media, from the press, and keep them protected in the way of making sure they got a full education, making sure that, they got the acting training needed and everything like that to be on set and to be able to deal with it. But that goes beyond the original three, because a lot of the side characters who were selected as well, you're looking at people like, Neville and Seamus, and, all the people from Gryffindor. You're looking at, Tom Felton playing Malfoy, and all of the other little side characters. They got exactly the same treatment. So it ended up being one big family. And I think that was really key and important, because that reflects massively on the screen with the actors playing it like they are members of family. They know each other. They have those interactions with each other and everything like that.
And the fact they grew up together, like they all speak about it as the years have gone by, that, they did school together, they did this, they had crushes on each other. It was that, at this point in time, that playground environment, but would soon become, growing up with them, obvious behind the scenes facts everyone knows. When you'd see them doing homework on screen, that's their real homework.
Yeah.
And in the UK, I think for child actors, they can only film half a day. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they're limited time on set. I want to say it's limited to 6 hours on set a day, or is that
6 hours on
12
set?
Hours?
Yes, I think it's around that. And then if it's summer holidays, my understanding is they're allowed a little bit longer. That's what I've found out in recent months, that should it be a school holiday when they're filming, they're allowed to do a full day of filming, which is interesting, because I never heard that. I'll tell you about that off air, what that's in regards to. But let's talk. I mean, listen, behind the scenes, there's a million different things and facts, and we'll cover a lot of it as the films go by. But for the first one, we want to talk about those core things. We've got a section we're going to do in each episode, and this might be the heaviest one in this, which is the no pun intended, wizarding world building, because obviously they call the IP Wizarding World, which is now back to Harry Potter within 10 years of changing the IP name. There's I don't even know how the best way to start this. I want to save Hogwarts for the end of this section, because Hogwarts is like, the key.
This film has the most difficult task of all of the films for the Wizarding World building, because it's got to actually build the Wizarding World. And we're talking from going into the film, in the first kind of 30 seconds of the film, you're introduced to magic. Then you're introduced to Harry's situation. Then you're introduced to, little bit by bit, the world of magic. And whether that's Hagrid kind of coming in and being introduced, whether that is, seeing Diagon Alley for the first time, and going through that entire process of kind of, what would it be like if you were randomly selected? What would it be like if you were selected to be, or you had the powers and you were chosen as a wizard, and you were seeing all these things for the first time? Because, of course, if we had it from Ron's perspective, you would have, he knows all of his brothers and sisters are wizards. His parents are wizards. Like, he's been introduced to that. He knows what's going to happen in every single step of everything, every single stage, because he's probably seen it and done it all before. You have fresh eyes brought in with Harry, who's being opened up to the entire world of wizardry, so that from the start of the film, if you didn't know what a wizard was or anything from the Wizarding World, by the end of the film, not even the end of the film, by like halfway through the film, you are already an expert in everything. And that's done through the visual sets that are shown, whether it is Diagon Alley, whether it's kind of, Hogwarts itself, the castle, like, the individual things like kind of the potions class, or whether it's, the Great Hall, or anything at all. But it's more than just that. It's introducing the concept of magic and having that thrown upon you as well. You don't have to deal with that in the later films. In fact, the things that get introduced become kind of almost diminished with each film, because nothing really needs to be introduced. You're introduced to everything from the start. So this film had the hardest job with that. And it managed to do it in such an amazing way that I still get goosebumps when you first see the Hogwarts castle with them going in on the boats. Like, yeah. I still get goosebumps when you see platform 9 3/4 and you see the train for the first time, because it invokes those memories. It brings you back to that time as a child, discovering it for the first time with the character of Harry. So, the world building here is phenomenal. One of the best world building films I think ever put to film. Being able to introduce all these concepts and having such unique sets that every single scene, you know exactly what's going on, and everything feels different, but you know what's going on.
It's really interesting, because obviously we grew up with this as we knew, and maybe for our generation in a nice way, when you hear people talking about Star Wars right in 77, when we saw this new world we've never seen. And whilst Harry Potter isn't futuristic, it's not sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's almost historical, Gregorian architecture. but as you said, it emotes that seeing the castle, that shot is probably maybe one of the best shots of the entire
Yeah.
8-film series, and will eternally live long in the legacy. And they will need to replicate that shot in December
But
because
it's
it's so important.
Do you know what's really funny? Whilst watching back through this film, myself and my partner Robin, all we were saying was, this is where they're going to cut and go to the next episode using
Yeah,
this shot.
it's the end of episode 2. That's my bet.
That's my bet as well. And it was every single time, it was like, oh my God, this is how they're going to break it down. This is how they're going to build up the world. If you want my prediction as well, end of episode 1 is going to be Hagrid saying, "You're a wizard, Harry," and that's where it's going to that's where it's going to pause. But you take this film, which is one continuous kind of thing. It's going to be compared to the TV series, of course, but you can break down the exact moment of world building that is created there. One line such as "You're a wizard, Harry" does as much world building in this film as the introduction as Quidditch, but it's done in one line. Quidditch is a visual kind of thing of you get to see the sport for the first time, you get introduced kind of flying on brooms and everything like that. But with one line from Hagrid saying "You're a wizard, Harry," that opens everyone's eyes to the world as much as that scene. And of course, you've got all the visual sets and stuff like that, but the world building does more than that with kind of, what the characters say, the introduction of characters through various different means and everything like that. Even McGonagall kind of transmorphing from a cat into a person as one of the first things that happens, that does enough to immediately drop you into that world.
The flying motorbike as well. It's almost 100%. Got like a sort of Spitfire type, it's got like a plane sound effect, and I don't think I think people understand, but I think it's easy to look back on 25 years later, but in my time as an adult, the only other franchise that I feel has done world building of this level was Dune, which
that was exactly what I was going to go into and say. That's the only other one where it feels like the world's been built up that way.
Within a scene I've not seen. I mean, I saw the prologue for part 3 the other week, so I'm even luckier than some.
Game of Thrones took the entirety of series 1 to basically build the world that they needed to build for the franchise to continue. That took an entire series. Not to say that it wasn't one of the best series ever put to TV, but at the same time, it took that long to get pretty much the same amount that they got from one film here.
Definitely, and kind of with these, I mean, you've mentioned the Hagrid scene with Harry, which you said is right. The follow-up of that is Diagon Alley, seeing that in not in person. Well, obviously we've seen it in person with the student tour, but even that is how are the wizards shopping? How are they living their lives? And it's as simple as behind a brick wall. There's another world, almost Wizard of Oz-esque. And okay, I know it's sort of based off the Shambles, but isn't based off the Shambles in New York, because there's also a famous street in London they talk about. There's so many conflicting sources of inspiration.
But it's so higgledy-piggledy and everything's off-centered and just...
Yeah, and it's Stuart Craig, who was the production designer on all 8 films, who passed away last year, did an incredible job with this, which, again, without his work and that set design alongside it all, it is that what historical things can we take inspiration from? And Diagon Alley is that first big selling point. We'll get to the soundtrack later, because that's obviously its own level with John Williams, but everything they do in such a short amount of... What you mentioned about Game of Thrones really smart. It took them a season, and they had a season to build to that. And this show will get a season to build to what they need to do. But this is probably 35, 40 minutes in, we're at Diagon Alley, or maybe we're past that heading to Hogwarts Express. And they have to go at 100 miles an hour. And whilst it's a 2.5-hour runtime, it's the second longest Harry Potter film, which is ironic. The 2 longest films being the 2 shortest books, which also goes to show the great job they did at adapting the source material. This is so much to introduce, and it did it in a way where it barely needed to be touched upon. And I know in Azkaban there'll be a huge discussion on the castle, but in this, Diagon Alley, they, bar Fred and George getting the joke shot, they never really needed to look back. That was nailed on day 0. And
I mean, Gringotts gets a little bit more as the films go on, but apart from that, nowhere really gets kind of at least repeated or returned to, but it does enough kind of to say this is what every single young wizard has to go through, and gives you that kind of, they have to go and get their books, they have to go and get their wands, they have to, they have to just get themselves prepared, their robes, everything.
And before we talk about the castle, I want to jump ahead to a part of the castle. I want to talk Quidditch because we'll do Hogwarts last. You're into sport like me, and
Oh yeah,
at a young age, seeing I'm not talking about the fake real Quidditch they do, which is very funny.
it
Not
looks
anyone that does
awful.
that, but it looks yeah, it's ridiculous. Getting the Quidditch match is like to create a fictional sport, which is an integral part of secondary school, but to create this lore around a fictional sport, I still love, and I understand why it had to take a backseat in past basically the second film, in certain moments at least, but seeing the stadium, the designs, the costumes, like it all felt so real, and I think that adds to the series and that immediate iconography that there was the time taken and spent into these ideas, these concepts, and even something that like resonates today. I don't know if you saw the memes from the World Cup. Obviously, the Americans are discovering Haaland for the first time. Obviously, to people that watch football, it wasn't, but there's been loads of Victor Crumb memes, and it's just people like watching Haaland because I guess the logic is you've got like, I don't want to be disrespectful, you've got an average team, although they're not that average. There's some good players, but you've got like the superstar standout of that team, which was Haaland, and it's like genetic freak.
Haaland scores a hat trick, but because he scored a hat trick, the game's over, but they've lost. Kind of like
literally they lost on pens, but he scored a hat trick. But even the Quidditch stuff like lived very long for me, like, and even I don't want to keep talking about the show so much. It's hard not to, but particularly for the first episode where it's even easier to compare it to, but we know Quidditch is going to be a fundamental part of the series because they have to. They're doing a TV series. They can't really afford to miss anything that wasn't on the page that they couldn't do later on. And Quidditch is a huge part of those books. Like it's, Oliver Wood's the joke character of, his life is Quidditch, and there's always some of that at school with football, but it is a big, big part of those books, in all of them, even the ones where he couldn't do it. And they're the reasons why the show exists eventually, to have that level of, we were able to develop this because we couldn't do it on film. But for the fact film was able to do it in such a commanding way, in 10 minutes of screen time in this film?
Oh yeah, 100%.
And then it even, getting to the final scene, to the final film, the Quidditch game from this has an impact on that with where the stone's hidden. And I love that building of that sports side. But I think segueing into Hogwarts, I mean, we mentioned that shot. It's one of the most iconic shots in cinema. That shot has led to theme parks being created of a castle in that way. You can't see it. I've got a Lego Hogwarts above me on a wardrobe. The new modular one they're doing, where it's like you basically build it across a couple of years.
Yeah,
it's one of the greatest film locations ever, which is a bit of a cop out because it's a school, right, and so much of it's set there. But to take the concept of a castle where you perform magic in, but just turn it into something genuinely special, I don't think everyone could do. And I think they made it work. Whether in this film it's shooting on location as well as in a studio, and later down the line it is, right, we need to build this to then now do studio stuff in, because we can't go on location. Old Wick Castle's used for this. Oxford University, I'm pretty sure, is used for this. Random passageway in the Midlands is used for some parts, and I understand they use
the staircase and the cloisters, and they kind of based the Great Hall off of Oxford University's main hall.
And it's understandable, and it all leads to this incredible creation. And I think another thing we haven't spoke about is when this film is being made, there's only 4 books that are out. The ending isn't known. There are 3 entries not known. There are things that could be brought in. There are things you mentioned, Gringotts. No one knew they'd go back to that in the 7th one for an integral sequence. And these sorts of things, where the films do such a good job early on, it makes it easier to revisit them. Maybe not to remake the sets or find those old sets, but it's why there's a studio tour. It's why they kept these things on loop and thought, let's display it. Let's have people visit it. Let's make it probably one of the country's biggest tourist attractions, if I'm honest now. Yeah. And Hogwarts, I think, is like the defining environment of that. I know it's such an easy way to say it, but I can't really say much more than what we have on Hogwarts. Maybe
no, 100%. No, it's just ended up being one of the most iconic film sets or film locations of all time. And just having that as an introduction. And I mean, in this first film, all I can think of and all I have memories of is that shot of them on the boats going towards the castle. And I don't know if there's many other establishing shots in this film of the castle. I think there's maybe a few when Harry's learning to fly the broom, and that's kind of it. There aren't really many other shots of the castle outside of that, but it's enough to stick in your memory.
The snow one, I guess, but that's more of
Snow.
look, we've changed
That's
season.
internal. I'm thinking like external
Yeah.
kind of everything. You get more as the films go on, but it's all built off and based off kind of what the first film showed us.
Absolutely. And kind of sticking with that's, we've got a section here which is story. I don't want to be rude and say some camera.
Yeah.
Do we have much to say about the Philosopher's Stone that hasn't been said over 25 years as a story? Because
I mean, the one thing that I noticed a bit more, being a bit more critical about my cinema over the years, is that the Philosopher's Stone as a MacGuffin is a terrible MacGuffin. It's an awful MacGuffin. It's one of those where it's like, oh, there's a stone that makes you immortal, and they decide to hide it in the school where, you know, a child who's famous for surviving, you know, basically an assassination attempt. And what's that? The assassin might not be dead, so we're just going to put them in the same place together. It's just like, it's ridiculous.
It functions because the first one, it's so inherently about learning, right? It's about understanding the world. I understand the story isn't going to be as in depth, let's say, as Azkaban, or even the Chamber of Secrets. To its own
Chamber of
respect,
Secrets has a better MacGuffin because it actually introduces introduces the Horcruxes, but it also kind of, you know,
develops the villain.
It develops the villain, and it does more to it. This one introduces the villain and kind of has, you know, Voldemort from a very early kind of standpoint is like, oh, he was the one who, you know, tried to kill you, dude. Like, he may still be alive. We don't know. Like, keep your eyes out and stuff like that. But as far as kind of the MacGuffin's concerned, it's terrible. It's like, yeah.
I'm with you. Again, that's from what we've seen behind the scenes. That's going to be very heavily expanded.
I mean, my only other thing, I guess, story adaptation direction is the book was called Philosopher's Stone. America, why is it called the Sorcerer's Stone?
Am I right in saying that, like, didn't J.K. Rowling and everyone in production be like, that's like our biggest regret? Because that's like by law it has to be Sorcerer's Stone. Now I do believe for the show they're calling it Philosopher's Stone over there now. I think they finally patched that up, but I mean the poor kids having to do every single scene twice to say sorcerers as well as philosophers. Like, I'm not going to mock Americans. It's obviously the complexity of they don't understand what a philosopher is, which is. Listen, I'm not going to be smart, right? At the age of 5, I didn't know what a philosopher was, but guess what? When I realised what a philosopher was, I was like, oh, that's why it's called the Philosopher's Stone. It's not that hard. It's not that deep. Children would learn it through this. Oh, no, it's too complex. It's
also, philosophers it's a word that comes from like ancient Greece or ancient Rome or something like that. It's not like exactly a British word. It's a word that transcends language. At the same time, like a sorcerer is something very different to a philosopher. It kind of changed the context of
it's
what
also
it is.
just a magician. Like, you might as well call it Harry Potter and the Wizard Stone. Like, that's what it is. It's a wizard stone.
Yeah.
But yeah, the title thing, I'm glad you brought up because it's still funny. 25 years later, the longer the series has gone on, the worse that looks as well. That decision, and they know it. They know it in America.
I guess we've also got like Zootopia, Zootropolis, and we've got other films that like Dead Men Tell No Tales and what was the other one? It was called Salazar's Revenge or whatever it is from.
Yeah, and sometimes that's based off copyright, isn't it? Like, have you had
it
a
is,
title?
yeah.
But yeah, I forgot about that.
But this was just based off just stupidity, I guess.
I agree. I mean, adaptation. We spoke about the book a bit. It's a very faithful adaptation overall. I think that's very fair to say. And obviously, those earlier books, it's understandably easier to make it faithful because they're 200, 300 pages versus 700 getting into 2 hours. A section I wanted to add, and it's the first time we're doing this. We've never done it before on this channel. Rather than sit here saying in the book this, they bettered this. I've called this section the cut that hurt and the change that worked. And for those curious, there's going to be one example per film. We'll each chat about one, and if any of our guests haven't read the books, that's okay. But for the cut that hurt, this is essentially something that they didn't do in the film that they did in the book. And again, it's much easier. Well, it's actually harder to do on these earlier ones, but it's easier because there's so few that were missed. I'm going to talk about something we know the series has to do, which is the cutting the character of Peeves. And for those unfamiliar, Peeves was cast in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Legendary British comedian Rick Mayall, who most people know from Bottom, I mainly know him from The Young Ones, who's one of the finest comedians this country ever produced. He was cast as Peeves. He did 1 day on set. He was asked to leave after 1 day on set because he was so funny, the children could not act around him. The footage has never ever been released or shown. The kids, the actors have spoke about being on set with Rick Mail, obviously many years later now knowing who he is. Rick
Yeah.
Mail, before he passed, had spoke about an interview saying, best job of my life, I got paid for 1 day and was told to leave. It's the greatest compliment to a comedian ever that you were too funny to play the role of a poltergeist. Therefore, not only will we cut you, we will ensure this character is never
Yeah.
shown in these films. And it's endearing. It's so perfect of Rick Mail's legacy, but it's also something at the same time like I would love to have just seen what he was saying to them on set that day. Like, yeah, the children could not act. He was too funny. That's remarkable.
But that's brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a compliment, isn't it?
And I know that we spoke about it on the casting video where we kind of went through casting various different like people for the different roles of what we thought would be in the new franchise, and we kind of said, oh yeah, we definitely want Peeves in there. But it was whenever we were casting the person, it was like we have to cast someone who could be as funny as Rick Mail, which is very, very hard to do. I think I picked Lee Evans in the end as the only other person who I think could have possibly done it. Like,
I can't remember mine.
Had like a hilarious face and just like, you know, had brought that energy to it and stuff like that. I mean, go watch the casting videos if you want to kind of see what we kind of predicted or who we thought would be good for each role in it. But I find it so funny that, you know, I wish do you know what? With the anniversary coming up soon, I really hope they do release it and that be part of it. That would be unreal. That would be absolutely fantastic. But
I mean, I know we're getting Peter Serafinovich now, which could be great. Obviously got a big background in comedy. As you said, if there's cool stuff, you know, they've mentioned on this announcement, we're going to put Philosopher's back at cinemas. Of 12 minutes of behind the scenes never seen. They always say it's never seen behind the scenes, but it always is. But yeah, if you can show Peeves, now is the time. I think the world would be down for that. Is there anything you wanted to bring up?
Yes, and this is a weird one because I'm already breaking the rules of the cut that hurt. So it's not a cut that was made per se in this film, but it was a decision they took from the offset to cast an older actor, an aging actor, as Dumbledore. Now, I know Dumbledore needs to be old. I get that. And I mean, Richard Harris, fantastic in the role. I think between himself and Michael Gambon, they both did a brilliant job in their own way. And they've definitely brought different kind of things to the characterization. But I think the cut that hurt here the most is the fact that they cast an older actor from the very, very start. And 2 films in, sadly, he passed away. I think a bit of foresight here to go for maybe we should cast a younger actor who looks a bit older could have meant that there was a bit more continuity throughout the franchise and not having to recast and not having to go forwards with that. But I think the cut that hurt the most here is just the fact that they did go with that decision, and then they had to kind of, you know, change the actor from Azkaban onwards. That kind of hurts in that same way. It's not a cut that it was a cut that they were forced into. It's not a cut that they kind of chose to make. But I think it's a decision that, especially with this new franchise, you know, they've already cast Dumbledore here. Is he too old for the role? Is my question. Will he survive even if they film it back to back? Is it something that's gonna?
It's really difficult to talk about because I know Richard Harris had given interviews saying his granddaughter basically should never speak to me, didn't take it, and I believe he was at the time.
Yeah.
And I understand from a studio perspective, they all the books went out too, which is always worth bringing up. Whereas now we know the 7-book cycle, and John Lithgow, who I think, I mean, he looked.
He's played British roles before,
now,
but yeah.
But also, you know, like with Agamemnon in the Odyssey, everyone's talking about aura farming.
Yeah.
That photo of Dumbledore, I was like, okay, excellent, like just perfect. But I am like, he's joked about being almost 90 playing Dumbledore. I'm like, it's not the fact you'll be almost 90 playing Dumbledore, mate. It's the fact that in the 6th film, the 6th series, you're going to have your most physically demanding
correct
doubles, right?
Yeah.
And Christopher Lee did action sequences to the end, the legend he is. And I don't want to sound rude, but it's something that historically happens.
Mm.
and I am personally somewhat surprised they then cast someone 10 years older for a
Yes.
series. That again, they know the outcome of where that
Correct.
goes. But
Correct. So
I think
that's I
I think
guess
it's a fair example.
it works as a cut that hurt, but I think it's just more of a decision that they made earlier on.
Yeah,
And I mean, to be fair, for my change that worked, we've already touched on it. We've already talked about it. My change that worked was deciding not to go with Spielberg and Spielberg leaving the project and going in with Chris Columbus instead, because I think Spielberg brings magic to every single film he does. You look at any film that he's worked with kids before. I mean, E.T. is the obvious example. But like, I feel like, I don't know. I think it would have been very, very different to
I
see I don't know if it would have been too childlike. Whereas this film, watching it
I
back, it's like, wow, this is like this has some horror elements. This has this has some scary moments. It has action. It has the drama. Whereas I feel like it would have been almost too passive if it was Steven Spielberg.
if it was Spielberg, the only question I have, and I don't think he'd have been upset with being restricted to British cinema. He actually gave
Yeah,
an interview recently, disclosed that. I think you saw it where he said, or he claims that he had been responsible for Maggie Smith because he'd worked with her on Hook. Oh my god, I've forgotten Hagrid's name, Robbie Coltrane. And a
yeah,
third actor, he'd implied that he'd planted the seeds of those three actors to be casts when he was working on it. Obviously, although Robbie Coltrane was always in J.K. Rowling's head, that's the official story. She'd always envisioned him from day one, which I do believe. But it is interesting that Spielberg was involved to a point with the casting process. But I just couldn't have pictured him. Sounds really horrible, like enforcing that. When Robin Williams wants to play a role and is being told no,
yeah.
I could see Steven Spielberg trying to make that happen. And Steven Spielberg, at that point in time, nobody is going to say, he just come off the back of Saving Private Ryan.
I was going to
and
say
shouldn't
it would have
assist in
been
Jurassic
so
Park, but
funny I'm going from Saving Private Ryan into Harry Potter. That would have
yeah,
been it would have been an insane, like, kind of an
and I
insane
think,
jump, shall we
and I
say?
do think Chris Columbus was the right choice for those
Mm,
early ones. 100% was right for those early
yeah.
ones. For my change at work, I've gone for something a bit awkward. I've gone for setting the series in quote marks modern day, aka 2001, because the books are set in 1991 from the first one onwards. Contextually,
Which
that's
they're
8 years,
doing that with the series, though, aren't they? They're going back to the
100%. And,
90s.
and,
Mm,
and this is the analogy. Like, if you're making this in 1999 for something that came out 8 years ago, you are not going to be like, oh, we've got to get this accurately right for 1991. So by the time, and in 2001, tech isn't really a thing yet. Phones are there, but they're not like smartphones. And by the time you get to Deathly Hallows Part 1, when you've got them going on to Piccadilly Circus, that's the
mm.
closest you get to sort of technology era. And it works just about. They get lucky in a nice way that things didn't radicalize too much. Had it been made in 2011, you'd have been in trouble. Now
Oh
you
yeah,
make it in 2026, you have to then do, and it opens the door for this future adaptation to be authentic because, in a depressing way, 1991 is now a period piece drama. That's now 35 years ago. That's like doing the 60s in 2001. For anyone that's curious about how time flies by,
yeah.
and obviously when you go further back into flashbacks, you're going to get like the mid 70s and stuff like that. So that's my big change at work. Was it's not that much of a change, but it does have an impact for where the series goes past this. Um, a few little bits of context here or there. I've got nothing much more to add on that. Do you?
No, I have nothing more to add on that as well.
Okay, now let's talk. Ooh, this section's going to be. We're not going to go through everyone one by one, but we've got a lot.
No.
We're going to talk about the characters, and we know this is an ensemble film, whether it be teachers, be students, be additions, a rock-up Defense and Dark Arts teacher for one time. But sticking with the Golden Trio, let's talk about these guys first. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, played by Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, Rupert Grint. It's tricky to talk about their role in this because they are so young, and on this channel we've always been very careful of how we talk about child actors for obvious reasons, treatment and whatnot. But when you get shows, we'll bring Game of Thrones again, right, where you get very young, like Sophie Turner, Maisie Williams, a lot of the time with young actors, it is a conversation of some of them are cast because they look the part, some of them are cast because there's something there. These three have incredible chemistry, and there's probably nothing I can add to the conversation about like what they would go on to do together, right?
Mm.
But they do feel like this trio come to life. And this film makes very conscious decisions to aid the future, taking the fake teeth out of Hermione so that Emma Watson hasn't got ridiculous things on for years until the fourth one. Okay, the running joke, you've got your mother's eyes and you don't. Daniel Radcliffe having his contact lenses took out on set after one day to go back to his natural green eyes because it's not going to work. They made some changes that benefit these young actors, and I really like them as a trio. And it's safe to say, naturally, as you expect of children, the acting improves as it goes film to film. They get more depth and development, but I love them in this. And again, looking back at that 25 years later cycle, it sounds really weird, but it's almost like cute seeing them again when they're younger, because the three of them have continued to act, done projects, done career stuff. So you look back at, especially at Philosopher's, like, we know we're going on this 10-year adventure with them across 8 films, but you see them in the early days, and I kind of love it. Like, it brings me back to my childhood, because I don't know if it's the same with you people like Anakin or these. It's like they were like your heroes because they were similar ages, albeit older. But it was like that really cool thing we had as kids.
Oh yeah, you just run into the woods and you grab a stick and suddenly you're a wizard, kind of thing. Like, I mean, the casting for this was fantastic. Honestly, if I'm rating their acting, I think Ron's actually, Rupert Grint actually does the best job out of the three of them in this first film. I think his natural comedic talent as the comedy relief character adds so much charm to the role. Harry, with Daniel Radcliffe, he has to be so serious in the role because he has to play the kind of elements of childish joy of having this kind of world put in front of him and not having any prior knowledge or previous knowledge or anything like that, previous experience. However, he also has to play the serious scenes. He also has to play the kind of dramatic scenes, stuff like that. And that's where child acting becomes a little bit harder to play those dramatic scenes. And I think he adapts as the films go on. And he's definitely a lot better at the dramatic scenes in the second film onwards. Hermione is my one critique out of the three of them, that it's almost overplayed a bit on how smarmy and nerdy and kind of almost needy that Hermione is in this film. And that's maybe a writing decision to go with that in that way. It's been so long that I wouldn't be able to tell you the exact characteristics of Hermione as a person, but I think out of the three of them, it's not bad acting, but it's definitely the weakest acting from the three of them as the kids. She does become a stronger actor kind of towards, I'd say from the second film onwards as well. I think they learn a lot from this first film. But as a trio, the chemistry, like you said, it's phenomenal. Like, to get those three being so friendly and so chatty with each other from day one, you see the behind the scenes of them and they just get on straight away. And to kind of have that kind of chemistry thrown onto the screen from very, very early on. You have the little arguments between Ron and Hermione, and you have Harry kind of being the glue that binds them together. You have Harry and Ron's moments because they spend a lot of time together in this first film. They're like best mates from day one. It's really great. And that even extends to kind of, Harry's chemistry with Malfoy, because there is chemistry there. Tom Felton playing a child actor, playing an evil caricature. I think he plays that incredibly as well in this first film, of just playing a really evil little prick of a child who's like, wait till my father hears about this kind of vibes and stuff like that. It's just,
It's the slicked back hair. Like, I mean, I grew up on the Borrowers. Yeah. Well, the comparison I've seen this week is Potter versus beggars.
Yes.
To get the Odyssey.
You get these beggars out of it. It's just
like the way Rob Pattinson pronounced that B is very Tom Felton-esque. And oh man, I mean, I remember seeing The Borrowers as a kid. We had it on VHS. Pea Green, Afraid of Milk, and then suddenly he's in Harry Potter. I loved it. I think Tom Felton was very well cast in these films. I loved, again, like isolating the first two. He's got the slick back hair. Then the third one, it's like again, so much changes of Azkaban in a great way. The first two are like a little double bill, and then the three onwards is like, right, let's get to the darker times, which I agree with for many reasons and disagree with as well. But the kids are so well cast, all of them. Like,
oh yeah.
Crabbe and Goyle, sorry to pick on the actors, it's like the book's like the stupidest, fattest, thickest people around. I'm not picking on the looks of children, but I'm like, they were the two Stooges. They were his like dumb security guards behind him. And Neville, which we know is such an important role now, which maybe we didn't in 99.
With,
What his
without
character?
saying that his character looks like he still wets the bed, without
Yeah, like,
insulting him, it's just well designed and well cast that is kind of the vibe that he gives off. That he is almost that kind of scaredy cat character who's kind of,
and they all stuck around in a nice way. Like, some actors come and go, some get recast who didn't have names, some are named who are not known to be important. We know, again, sorry to bring up the show, but they've got the seven books written. They know exactly, okay, do we need to cast you? Do you need to stick around? Yes, we do. Okay, we'll have you stick around. But a family which I love in this, who I've got to talk about, man, is the Dursleys. Like, these are like these are the almost the comedy relief of this film. And like, it was, oh, there's no Harry Potter film, let's go visit the Dursleys for a day, see what they're up to this time round. And I just absolutely love Richard Griffiths, Fiona Shaw, and Harry Melling. I know we'll talk about one of them in much more depth soon, but they functioned again so well as these are the nastiest, repulsive individuals you can find. You know, who would want to raise this child and keep them under there? I really like Fiona Shaw in this, but to me, Richard Griffiths, like in this film, he knew exactly from day zero,
yeah.
Smiling as he's throwing the post into the fire.
Hamming it up, yeah. I bet
it
you
is.
know what's so lovely as well, because you watch the behind the scenes and you look at the stories, and it's like, they have nothing but like friendly things to say about each other, but you watch the performances on the screen and it feels like hatred from both sides. It's one of those where, of course, they've had to get on and stuff like that. Otherwise, like, it would be a bit tense on set and stuff like that. But my God, I'm so happy that, like, Richard Griffiths, Fiona Shaw, and even Harry Melling, they were all so friendly to, Daniel Radcliffe, and, got on with him really well and had that chemistry, which you can almost see off screen, that you can imagine some of the takes, them pausing the take and laughing afterwards and stuff like that, and like, encouraging each other and having fun with it, because everyone seems to be having so much fun with the role in those scenes. Especially as the films go further on, like, it's just really, really well cast from the off for every single role.
Absolutely, and a couple of teachers we'll talk about. We know they're going to get their moments across this whole series, but we've spoke about Rich Harris as Dumbledore. Does so well. Again, how he's presented on screen contextually at this point in time. He is, again, that defining page to screen of Dumbledore, I feel, for the films. But as what you said earlier, when you get to the later films, I couldn't have seen Richard Harris doing some of the character choices, which, again, is understandable because nobody knew where that character would go. I want to add, but let's talk Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid, who was BAFTA nominated for this film.
Yeah.
Again, opening scene, character made perfect. Like, I've got nothing eloquent to say, or I'll be totally honest, I've got nothing I can add to some of these characters that's not been said historically. I know we're looking at it 25 years later, right? And it's the dawn of these relations, but certainly of the teachers, I've sort of grouped them together. McGonagall, Hagrid, and Snape, they are the three teachers that have the most screen time, I would say, across the 8 film series. And we've lost those 3 actors now, 2 of which in recent years. And we're at this point, which is quite sad with this film. So it's looking at 25 years later, there are a lot of cast members no longer with us. And a lot of them have been the adults, the teachers. Maggie Smith passing away 1 year to the day after... Oh God, I've forgotten second Dumbledore's name. That's escaping me because I've got the wrong schedule. I don't want to say Rich House by mistake. You know who I mean. Deary me. Anyway.
Wait, who are you talking about?
The second Dumbledore.
The second Dumbledore. What's his name? Michael Gambon.
Michael Gambon. She died 1 year to the day after he did, which is quite, freaky. And McGonagall is that, like, she's kind of a mother figure to Harry in these films. And from day one, you that opening scene when she says, "I've spent time with these people, they're awful." Straight away, okay, she's going to be all right. She's going to be all right. And I think there's that payoff when you get to Deathly Hallows Part 2 with the McGonagall character. The payoff of payoffs for me personally, and that's her relationship with Daniel Radcliffe, their chemistry together. I know they'd worked together, I think, on Oliver Twist before this as well, so she'd worked with him directly. But the one everyone's going to talk about is obviously Alan Rickman as Snape, who, like all of these other characters, made the role their own instantly but you look at Alan Rickman's career, and this is his defining role
Yeah,
for many different reasons. I'll talk about this more in probably the third episode, but they wanted Alan Rickman, so in turn they age up the entirety. Snape is meant to be in his early 30s at this point in time. He would be 32 years old. They wanted
yeah,
Alan Rickman, so they put him into his 40s, which meant every character of his age would then be in their 40s onwards. That's a great choice because it meant they could get Alan Rickman and eventually Oldman, Thulis,
yeah,
and many others. But Alan Rickman, from the first time you see him, is just, he's Snape.
yeah.
They never had to change
100%.
his costume, by the way, ever. Him and Maggie Smith, their
Great.
costumes never change. And again, there's nothing I can add to those conversations about those three, but their impact is astronomical.
I mean, between the three of them, they were perfectly cast for every single role, and they're iconic in their own way. And I think it's going to be the hardest thing, without sounding too bad about it. I think it's going to be okay replacing Dumbledore because we've seen two actors play the role, and they played it in such different ways that you can go ahead and you can go, okay, I can see this role being played in multiple different ways. I'm finding it really hard to see McGonagall played differently. I'm finding it really hard to see Hagrid played differently. I'm finding it really hard to see Snape played in any other way. I think that's reflected off the fact that in the trailer or the teaser or whatever was released so far, with Hagrid, it feels like a very similar kind of way of being played, like the role being played. Like it already feels very similar, and it doesn't feel like anything's changed. Just from a little teaser. It's no disrespect to Nick Frost, but like it does feel like almost an impression of the character instead of actually being the character.
It's going to be so that I feel that's the hardest one because
I think Snape you'll get away with just because of, well, first of all,
the age,
the race, the age. It's a very wildly different character, and I feel like it's going to be played in a very wildly different way. But I mean, even McGonagall kind of looks, you can tell it's McGonagall, but like, Maggie Smith was a lot older in the role, and she brought that kind of almost motherly feel to it all the way through, where I don't think we're going to get that in these films or in the series. But no, they were almost perfectly cast in that sense, and it was brilliant to see them on screen all the way throughout the films. But the first film is so key and important because it gets you on their side. It gets you kind of the bedrock of each character.
No, I agree with you on that. And someone very quickly will bring up, because each episode this will change. The Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for this film is Professor Quirrell, played by Ian Hartz. Fun fact, David Thewlis auditioned for the role of Quirrell and didn't get it, which worked out well.
I think Thewlis would have been phenomenal in that role, as well.
Great.
I think he would have worked for it.
He got a better one, though, which
he
we'll
did
get to
a
talk
better
about
one.
in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Now we're going to do a new section, which I've never done before. This came off the fly. This is called Look at Them Now. It sounds like there should be a quote, but it's not. Where, Tayte, you'll pick an actor, and we're going to talk about their career. And I don't know, well, I think I worked out already, but you're going to pick an actor from this film. We're going to look at them 25 years later and just have a look at their career, maybe talk about what they've done. Not like, well, we're sat there reading Wikipedia, but just, it's an open conversation.
Yes, and I mean, it's the first film, so I have a lot of choices. I could go with anyone from the Golden Trio. I could go with, I mean, a lot of the teachers sadly have passed away, but like I could go with a lot of, various different actors here. I'm going for what I think is an underrated actor for this film because he gets some screen time, but he's so important at the start of this. But then out of all of the actors coming away from Harry Potter, out of all of the young actors coming away from Harry Potter, he's the most likely to go on to win awards, and he's the only one who I feel has truly separated himself away from Harry Potter. I mean, Daniel Radcliffe's tried doing various different projects and stuff like that, and he's gone for indie projects specifically to get away from that sense. Emma Watson's gone on to do big Hollywood kind of films and is now kind of faded into the background a bit. And Rupert Grint pops up every now and then for things and has gone a bit back into theatre. I want to talk about Harry Melling. I want to talk about Dudley Dursley. And I want to talk about the fact that of all the actors to come from this kind of, the first film here, it's the fat, annoying kid who's ended up being this kind of like thin kind of method character actor that is appearing in, award-winning series, being kind of, pushed towards nominations and stuff like that. I think he could have easily got a nomination for his short stint in The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I can't remember if he got nominated for Queen's Gambit for his kind of supporting acting role in that. But he just goes for some phenomenal projects and ends up acting people off the screen. Like, I remember, was it The Devil All the Time that he was also in? Where
Yes.
as a film where you had Tom Holland, you had Robert Pattinson, you had such a big cast, and coming out of that film, I was like, no, that Harry Melling performance was incredible. Like, he's one of those actors where he's attaching himself to the right projects. Things like Pillion from last year, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard phenomenal things about. And he seems to be the only actor right now who has that trajectory towards an Oscar one day, or has that trajectory towards, an Emmy or a major award, like on, stage, screen, film, whatever. He's just had a phenomenal career, and you just wouldn't expect it from this one small minor role character.
I think what makes it more special is he's got such a presence in like the first two films, I would say. Nice. More in this, obviously, but immediately is this boisterous cousin. He's awful. You hate him. He's greedy. He's selfish.
Yeah. What was it?
Very funny to laugh at.
32. I had 33 last year. Kind of like, it's just like
jumping on the stairs. I love him as a character because everyone's had a cousin they dislike. Everyone's had a cousin they dislike. And what goes on with his... I mean, I think he's in a fat suit by the time you get to Deathly Hallows, I think I read correctly.
Yeah.
Like, he lost so much weight, they're like, we can't have you on set like thin your character.
I mean, we'll get to it when we get to Deathly Hallows, but I think the cut scenes make a difference.
See, Dudley has a really good character arc from Order of the Phoenix onwards. And they don't show it in 6. Like many things they choose not to show in 6. And they do focus on the wrong things with what they do put on. That's a different video, obviously. And in 7, there's a nice little moment. And I really like where that character goes and probably what they would do in their elder lives. But Harry Melling's career is fascinating because you're at Ballad of Buster Scruggs. That's the first time I think I'd seen him. I still haven't seen Queen's Gambit. I know that was his kind of
Queen's Gambit is genuinely, his performance in that is fantastic. Of course, you've got Anya Taylor-Joy in that role. You've also got Thomas Bruden Sangster as kind of the 3 main people in that role and stuff like that. But he stands out. He is incredible in that series.
And this is it. And I mean, I didn't see Pillion at London Film Fest last year. He was with Alexander Skarsgård as the co-lead, and that was one of his career best roles, they said. Devil All the Time, Lost City of Z, 2 films there with Tom Holland working with Rob Pattinson. He's working with auteur directors. He's been in the Macbeth film, the one that was done by one of the 2 Coen brothers. I always forget which one did, which one didn't.
Yeah.
But you're right, he's had maybe the best career of the kids that followed. From the core... Should I say the core kids?
Yeah, I'd say from the core kids, yeah.
There's one that has a smaller role in one film who we'll all talk about when we get to that one. But I'm glad you picked him because you do look at the breakthrough since, and I do think he's there, and I'm in the same category as you, that there will be a performance where he's on that international stage. And I think he's an actor where, because he isn't recognisable, because he physically doesn't look the same as he did as a child, it's been much easier for him to break away from that. And he still speaks about Potter. He's very positive with his time on it. It isn't like, oh, don't talk about that when I was younger.
Yeah.
It is one of them. I was like, yeah, this was massive for me. And I've been able to do this since. And I'm glad you picked him. He's one of the right ones. And I said that it's going to be one of these every episode for an actor we want to put the spotlight on. I'm glad you picked Harry Melling on this one. And something else we'll talk about the score of this film before we start to run out into our last moments. John Williams does the score to Harry Potter. At this point in time, in 2001, John Williams has done 4 Star Wars films. He's done Jaws. He's done, every Spielberg film pretty much at that point. Won numerous Oscars. Is a country mile at this point in time the best working composer in Hollywood. And you managed to get him for Harry Potter.
And he makes one of his most iconic scores for his career.
Exactly. At the same time, he's doing the prequels, which I believe is his best Star Wars work. Controversial opinion.
Yeah.
But he with one theme, we spoke about world building earlier.
Mm.
His theme is as integral to any location as the music. You go into Diagon Alley, it's the music that's in Diagon Alley. You go to Hogwarts, it's the Hogwarts theme. Every approach he has, he even creates a theme for Voldemort, who's basically not even really a character in this. There's an atmospheric cue to him.
Mm.
Quidditch, he nailed. Like, he's the greatest composer of all time in the film industry. And I think to have got him on Harry Potter is a feat that's remarkable. And again, I will bring up the show. Everyone has said, are they going to play the theme or they're not?
Mm.
Are they going to do the theme or they're not? Who could you get? They've gone and got Hans Zimmer. But will Hans Zimmer use that original Hogwarts theme? I struggle to see a world. This isn't a case of like, oh, you can't do the Dark Knight theme and do a different Batman. You go to the theme parks and apparently it's the Harry Potter theme.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be. And if they do their own theme, they do something different, fair play.
I mean, I guess it's a very
Superman.
similar thing to talk about Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones kept the same theme song for, House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon.
Because it was iconic. It'd be difficult to kind of come up with one that couldn't tie you into the franchise in the same way. So I do wonder if they will go with the same theme again. But I mean, he is the absolute top maestro, master of his field, John Williams, creating iconic scores across his entire generation. It would have been very interesting, once again, if it was another Spielberg film, because it would have been another Spielberg, John Williams score, which, as a combination, once again, would have added to that legacy that they've had together as a team. But for me personally, I mean, to have so much whimsy and have so much almost magic thrown into the music, like to make it so iconic in that sense that as soon as you hear certain notes, certain things, certain parts of the theme, you're immediately transported to that world of magic. That has a lot of power, more than some stuff that you can put on screen. And the fact that he was able to kind of capture the essence of childhood whimsy, discovery, imagination, and magic, and turn that into music. And I'm not saying that any other composer couldn't have done this, but with the wrong composer and the wrong music, it doesn't quite work. You need that magic brought through. You need that theming coming through. You need everything working for it to have the overall package that is, an iconic film that captures, childhood essence of magic.
It doesn't sound like anything that's come before. And again, I'm going to jump to Dune as like the modern day example, right? When Dune was announced and Hans Zimmer, politely says, I'm doing Dune, which means I'm not doing Nolan's next few films, which has worked out for the better. Hans Zimmer has created something that everyone in the world can isolate down to a T. That's Dune.
Yeah.
And John Williams did this with Harry Potter instantly, opening scene. And the fact that that's like one of you, and you can look at John Williams' career, right? Harry Potter would be the best score of 99% of composers' entire careers. And John Williams like, he did Star Wars, he did Jaws, he did this, he did that. Is it the best? And I know he'd spoken. There's a really great documentary that came out a year or two ago on John Williams, and he said, my intention was to do every single Potter film, but I just could not do them all. And he was the point that they were meant to get him back for the final film, and they'd worked that in, but they couldn't make it work. Like, he says, I've never done a film I didn't want to do.
Oh, but he did enough. He did enough work in this film to.
This is it.
Set the franchise.
He said, yeah, and his work. And I think some of his best work in this is also in the third one, which we'll get to. But as we said, he is integral to this as any of the other creatives we spoke about today. It is his audio that really does create that environment. And kind of sticking with that, let's talk about the legacy of this film as we do these sections. We're here talking about it 25 years later for the anniversary. There's a legacy in itself. We're doing a 25th anniversary retrospective because this film's age.
Yeah.
This would gross 1.029 billion at the box office. This has been re-released numerous times. It's getting a re-release at the end of August. I don't know how wide a re-release it is, but it seems to crop up once a year in cinemas in England, I'll be honest.
Yep.
I feel like they always come out, and people always go. I don't know if I will, because I'm rewatching them all now. But it was obviously financially, I think at the time it was the third biggest film of all time behind I think it was the third biggest film of all time behind Titanic and The Phantom Menace when this released. Obviously, Return of the King would come out 2 years later, and many other films that would follow, but it was obviously a financial success. It would be nominated for 3 Oscars and 7 BAFTAs. I don't normally detail BAFTAs, but with this being a British production, you'll see the difference there. And I will say, this is the series that went on to win 0 Oscars. And then Fantastic Beasts got an apology Oscar when that came out, which I've got my own opinions on that. But a question for you, and this isn't too heavy, this isn't a ranking. Where would you say this stands in the series for you? Like as an entry? It's an awkward question for me to ask.
If I'm being honest, as much as we say fantastic world building, blah 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 blah, whenever I watch through the films, I do it kind of almost based on the story told on the screen. And as much as I'd like to turn around and say this has the most phenomenal world building, this has the most phenomenal score, everything like that, blah 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 blah, it's not one of my favorites. It's not one that I would go back to and watch in isolation or in a vacuum. And it's not one that, like I said, I sometimes start the series with the third film. And then go onwards because it takes different direction. It takes a different kind of approach to the films and stuff like that. And you can definitely tell the actors have aged up a bit. The acting becomes really clear that it's phenomenal from that stage onwards. So for me personally, it is on the lower half, but I think that might change as I rewatch through all the films this time round as I go through. Thinking of it kind of, as a whole film way instead of just kind of going, well, this is what my personal favorite is. If I'm thinking what's the best, this is one of the best because it does all the hard work. It does all of it casts the right people. It has the phenomenal score, the amazing cinematography. It sets up the story well. The world building is phenomenal and everything like that. So I think it's one of the best films in the franchise, but it's not one of my favorites.
I think that's absolutely fair. I'm kind of in the same boat as you that I hate to know why I respect these films the most because respect is an important thing in the industry. But for everything this did and does and sets like lays the table ready for the others to build off and move forward with, I think it's one of the most important films British cinema's produced. And it sounds like a final thoughts. Maybe this section is a final thoughts to an extent, but it is a film that's so held up in a really good way. A few little things here and there doesn't, as you'd expect, on performances and whatnot, but it's hard to look past the stature of this, and with it being the 25th anniversary, the spotlight coming on this film. It's not my favourite. Maybe it's near the top, but I'm in the same boat as you. I'm going to probably go through these again one by one, like see how I feel.
Yeah.
And if the anniversary adds a different dynamic to that, maybe it does. And maybe knowing there's a series coming also changes the dynamic of what we were able to do that these couldn't, vice versa. I'm really curious, but I think this is probably like one of the best, but it isn't the one I throw. I don't really throw them on for rewatches, but I would look at Azkaban.
There are some individual films in the Harry Potter franchise that you can just watch in a vacuum and watch it and go bang. Like I can just watch this film.
3, 4, and 8.
3, 4, and 8. You can watch those and go great.
Maybe 5.
I'd throw 5 in there as well. And you can watch it without any films before, any films after, and go, actually, I can just watch this film. I can just shove this on, and it's fine. And I guess one, as soon as you do one, you kind of have to watch through all of them. You start it there, you have to watch them all. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And kind of next bit would say favourite scenes. I mean, it's hard to narrow this down.
I don't think it is. I don't think it's hard to narrow it down at all. I think.
Are you doing You're a Wizard, Harry?
I'm not doing You're a Wizard, Harry. My favourite scene is the establishing shot of the castle. I think that introduction into kind of that world and everything like that is bigger and better than kind of anything else. It's the one part that sticks in my memory the most from all of it.
I love. This is very specific. Dry up Dursley Great Prune, because then he does actually pull the trigger, which kind of makes it fun like he's actually gone to kill him.
Yeah.
Which isn't talked about enough. Granted, it doesn't obviously work. I love the You're a Wizard. As you said, it establishes right. I love the Dursleys putting the pigtail on him. All their little comedic moments. I love the Mirror of Erised.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the best scene, but it stands out to me. But as you said, like it's hard to pass the establishing shot, the music that comes in with the cue. Then you follow that into the Great Hall as well, with the stairs, everything. That's when okay, this is something new. This is something different. We're on a new. This is why everyone dreams about coming to Hogwarts. And strange Americans want it to be real and think that's how our schools are, which it really isn't. And they never were.
I will say one scene that was previously one of my favorites, which I could not enjoy on rewatch, was the Quidditch. As much as I love, like I said, the Quidditch match, Harry does nothing in the Quidditch match. You watch it's just literally just scenes of him going, oh, and just reacting to things the entire time. It's like watching.
And he's got the quickest broom.
He's got the quickest broom, and yet he's not even the quickest on it. It's one of those where it's like this. He's just like he's a pay-to-win driver, and somehow is he's the
It's
whole.
generation.
He's the Russell meme thrown in with like a stroll driver. It's just like does nothing.
Like
Somehow
Nepo
gets.
Baby, like
That's the one.
your dad was the best seeker ever. Simeone's son? I don't know. I don't know who it would be. Like,
But if you
yeah,
rewatch that scene, it's hilarious because he does nothing. He doesn't move from the start until he starts chasing the snitch, which is literally like 30 seconds towards the end. It's genuinely like Messi in the World Cup. He's just stood up front, and then every now and then he'll get the ball and score. It's ridiculous.
a better comparison. I mean, honestly, the lore I've read is that Gryffindor team of the first 3 years is basically Spain 2010. That's a really in-depth nerd thing, but like
it's unreal defense and just
team,
like
they would have won 3 titles in a row if not for one season being cancelled due to students being attacked.
Brilliant.
And the other season, the best player misses the final to win it for them.
Yeah.
But like when I've read these articles, it's funny. It's like generational talent of this Gryffindor era is funny. Different conversation, but normally we go into final thoughts. But I sense we've kind of just
covered it already. Yeah.
Yeah, which maybe I'll swap that around on the next schedule because this is the first episode of this retrospect. So if anyone's got any thoughts, please do comment them. We'll obviously read them, take them into account for next week. I say next week because next episode is going to be Chamber of Secrets, which will be dropping this Friday. Obviously, as you said, it's like a double parter, isn't it? So the next one's going to be Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. It's getting busy. As I said, we're building up to the series while celebrating the anniversary. Chamber of Secrets is so close to that original anniversary. It's going to be interesting talking about that because I do think that's the one obviously I've struggled with as I've got a bit older, whereas that was my favourite like as a 5-year-old for varying reasons. And I'll get into that. But that is everything. Tayte, thank you so much for joining me today. As we know, we're going to get you on for a few more of these. Everybody watching at home, thank you all so much for watching for this first episode. We've got a lot of things happening on the channel at the moment. Spider-Man would have came out last week by the time this video goes up. We've had big videos on the Odyssey as well. It's getting quiet, which is why we're doing all of these in August rather than into September. But as we head into the end of the year, there is going to be Oscar season, the usual stuff, June, Avengers, there's been San Diego news. It's going to get busy, but that is me rounding out. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care. I'll see you on the next one.